next up, we have Professor Barbara Oakley from the Oakland University in the US. Here's Barbara, and Barbara is going to talk to us today about the magic of the brain's hidden learning system. So first of all, good morning, Barbara. I know it's very early where you are, so thank you so much for being up so early today. I think it's at 6 o'clock or something like that. So it's yeah, I think you get a special medal for this one. It's thank you.
Well, I'm always an early bird, so it was actually a privilege to watch some of the earlier talks here. So this is such a great idea to do these kind of flash presentations. And I guess I better start flashing my presentation because I don't have much time. But what I want to do to start with here, rather than actually have my screen up, what I want to do is I want to show something that has nothing to do with my presentation, but it's like totally awesome. So I think people would like to know about this. So what I'm going to do is, so this has to do with if you are presenting to an audience that speaks another language. So if you're an English speaker or whatever your language, what I want to show you is you go to slideshow and then you go to always use subtitles. And then, so remember, you know how when people explain something to you, you go, wait, how did you start that again? So it's go to slideshow tab, then always use subtitles, then go like, let's say you want Spanish. So go to Spanish, check that. Now watch what happens when I start my presentation. So I'm speaking, and this should be coming up with a little bit of Spanish translation. I am told from the languages I've done things with before that the translations aren't too bad. They actually catch the main ideas you're speaking about. So I think this is really awesome, and it's kind of amazing how many different languages, everything from Maltese to you name it is available for you. But anyway, so let's get started. Oops. But first we'll take away our subtitles with what we're speaking about now. So I want to just explain with this very short presentation why learning online can be so powerful and so useful, and how to make it more powerful and useful. And let's see. And so I'd like to begin with just presenting my favorite athlete of all time, who is Julius Yego. Julius is from Kenya, and if you know anything about Kenya, you know it's famous for its long distance runners. But if you look at Julius's arms, they do not look like a long distance runner's arms. And indeed, he always wanted to throw the javelin. But there were no good javelin throwing coaches in all Kenya, and he couldn't afford to go to another country to study. So he began watching YouTube. And do you know that 99% of the time, simply by watching YouTube, good instructors on online learning and going out and practicing, watching brilliant instructors, going out and practicing, simply doing this, he won the world champion in javelin. So what this tells you is that our teaching online can be extremely powerful for students. But I want to give you a little bit more insight into why learning online and going off and practicing on students' own is so important. But to understand this, we first need to kind of get a sense of what's going on in the brain. The brain's pretty complicated, so we have to simplify it. And in simplifying, what we can do is just focus on one of the brain's biggest building blocks. Well, it's a tiny building block, but we've got 86 billion of them, so we've got plenty to spare. And this is the neuron. And we've got nomenclature, it's like an arm that reaches up, an axon. We've got these legs that are called dendrites, and then there's like toes on the legs. Those are called dendritic spines. But we don't really need to remember or know anything more than that. The reality is what neurons are doing is they are helping us to learn and remember things. And what is actually happening, if I can get this to actually work properly, is, let's see, what have we got here? Okay, run. Okay, is that when neurons are making, when you learn something new, you are simply building a set of connections between neurons. This is whether you're learning to take a derivative in calculus, conjugate a verb in Spanish, do a pirouette, learning to dance. Whatever you're learning, you're creating new sets of links in long-term memory. And as you do this, as you're practicing, you are strengthening the sets of links between neurons. So in essence, as you learn something, you're creating this really nice set of links between neurons in relation to the topic that you're learning. And as you practice more, you have this nice, strong set of links. And so you have this set of links and you put them in long-term memory in the neocortex. But what I haven't mentioned is that you can put them in long-term memory in two different ways. You can put them in long-term memory by, well, your working memory is what you can hold temporarily in mind. And so like what I'm saying to you now goes into your working memory, and then it goes through this dark blue thing called the hippocampus, and it forms links in long-term memory. This hippocampal pathway is called declarative learning. It's sequence-based learning. It's like what I'm doing right now. I'm explaining step by step some ideas. But there's another way that you learn, and that is through the procedural pathway. And the procedural pathway goes through this red area, which is the basal ganglia. So procedural learning is quite different. It can happen like you see a pothole and you've learned that you need to avoid that pothole. So this black box of the procedural system, the basal ganglia, learns these kinds of things. Or your working memory might tell the basal ganglia, hit the baseball. And so then the basal ganglia tries to do it, and you learn is in essence how to hit the baseball through the basal ganglia. So these two ways of creating sets of links in long-term memory each create links that have different characteristics. Declarative, well, you're mostly conscious as you're learning in this way. Procedural, you're often simply not conscious of you learning something. So you can, as you're a little kid, you're learning a language procedurally, your mother tongue. And so you're just hearing it, but you're not really conscious of the fact that you're actually learning what the patterns of the language are. Declared learning, it develops through explicit instruction, like what I am doing now, whereas procedural learning develops through practice. So when Julius was watching YouTube, he was getting some declarative sets of links through this explicit instruction, but then he was going out and practicing to develop his procedural links. You might think, oh, that's only for motor skills. Turns out the procedural system is for complex patterns as well. So it's also things like mathematics and learning language. You can explain declarative learning. You can't explain procedural learning. So a child may know how to solve an equation mathematically. They can't explain it, but they can do it. But if we force them to explain it, it may or may not be helpful for that child, because if they've learned it procedurally and they can do it well procedurally, it may be frustrating for them to try to put it into words. But declarative involves sequential, whereas procedural is complex patterns. So it's not just, stupid rote learning, although it can involve learning things by heart. It also involves learning complex patterns. Declarative is fast to learn, slow to use, whereas procedural is slow to learn, but fast to use. Like learning how to type on a keyboard takes a lot of practice, but once you do it, you can be really fast. On the other hand, however, declarative is flexible. Procedural is inflexible. If I took that keyboard and I changed the keys, what those keys stood for, it would be a terrible time to reprogram my brain so I could type quickly again. So in essence, we've got these declarative ways of learning and procedural ways of learning. Some people learn better declaratively. Others learn procedurally. So, for example, declarative learning, it seems that those with a tendency towards dyslexia may prefer to learn better declaratively, whereas those who may lean more towards the autism spectrum, they may learn better procedurally. And again, you may, reduce their liking for school if you insist that they must learn declaratively. But by and large, however, you want people to try to develop links through both ways of learning. And as it turns out, getting little unexpected rewards, such as satisfying their curiosity or some other kind of fun thing, that releases dopamine, and dopamine, as it turns out, helps enable both pathways of learning. So a little bit of unexpected reward, a little fun in a video can help increase a student's ability to learn through both systems. So returning back to Julius Jaego, I would just like to say that these short form 10-minute talks can actually be quite valuable, because what they're doing is they're giving you a declarative, direct explanation of the topic at hand. But the reality is it's sort of like, for you want to be like Julius Jaego. You've got these ideas. Fantastic. Now go forth and practice with them. So even in your online learning, the more you can have great short snippets to give the key ideas through the declarative system, but encourage practice on their own to develop those procedural sets of links. That's the best combination. So with that, I would like to thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. I think that's so interesting. And yeah, we've had a lot of discussion in the chat. I have placed in the chat, everyone. I don't know if everyone is seeing the chat, but I've placed a link to one of Barbara's online courses, Learning How to Learn. Now, I cannot recommend this course enough. I'm actually taking this at the moment, but I wish I'd taken it before I had started my undergrad course, because it would have helped me so much. And a number of the people on the course in the community have actually said that they recommend this course to all of their first year students, and they found it really helps. So I think it's a tool. I think, we should be telling students about this course because it can only help, and I think it's a fantastic resource. So we've had a number of questions, but if anyone would like to ask a question, if you could raise your hand, and I will unmute you and you can ask Barbara a question. So we have Lisa. I'm just going to unmute your mic, Lisa. Okay, you should be able to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Presenting today. So good to hear your talk about neurons. And I've taken Learning How to Learn. I took it about 5 years ago when it was first offered. And I just wonder, in developing the coursework, is there going to be, do you think you'll integrate any of the lessons that we've learned from cognitive linguist Dr. George Lakoff and his understanding of the way our human brain uses frames in order to understand complex concepts? Thanks.
George Lakoff is awesome. I've just completed a paper with my co-instructor Terry Sinowski that quotes Terry's friend George Lakoff about why the procedural system has actually been neglected. So I think that George Lakoff's work on metaphor has been brilliant, and I really am trying to. So I'm just working on a course right now that should launch on Coursera on July 16th called Uncommon Sense Teaching. And we actually have a section on metaphor there, and we cite George Lakoff's work. So I think he's brilliant, and I just wish that I could pay more tribute to the work he's been doing for many, many years.
Thank you so much. That's great to hear. I look forward to the course. And I've been working with his theories in what we call information literacy, which is just teaching people how to use the library. So I will be interested to see how you've adapted his theory.
Oh, okay. Well, he's just a terrific thinker, and really one of the breakthrough linguists who really, or he's made a tremendous difference in the field of linguistics.
Thank you. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. And Jonathan, I've unmuted your mic, so if you'd like to ask Barbara a question. You need to unmute your mic, Jonathan.
Well, I like this way is easier because it's an easier question to answer, because I can make up whatever I want.
Okay, it looks like we may have lost.
No, he's saying the unmute is not working.
Ah.
Is there a way to? Oh shoot.
Can you type in the chat, Jonathan?
Learning a language or not is so complicated, and so many different approaches work or fail. How do you come up with a mix of ways, therefore, to suit different students? I think one of the challenges, this is an incredible question. So I studied the Russian language at the Defense Language Institute for a year and a half, and that's one of the premier language learning institutions in the world. And I believe that one of the reasons it's so successful is that it makes brilliant use of both declarative learning and procedural learning. So to develop your procedural sets of links, you need plenty of practice, and interleaved practice is the best. I think that a challenge in teaching language now is that oftentimes students are only taught declaratively and they learn declaratively. So you can memorize a list of vocabulary words, and you can follow as a teacher is explaining what they're explaining declaratively. But this set of links that results from this doesn't allow you to be fast and flexible and intuitive with your language. So, I think it's just, it's not that teachers are necessarily bad or anything like that at all. It's just the constraints of, if you're teaching in a high school, how much realistic practice can you give individually to students to allow them to develop that procedural system? The more that we will be able to develop online courseware, I think that challenges students to keep that practice, the more I think that we will really be able to reach all learners with language learning. That's a very quick answer to a complicated question, so I hope you'll forgive me if I didn't do it real justice.
No, that was a great answer. Thank you, Barb. Thank you. Okay, we could keep this going all day. I don't know, people will just want to keep Barbara asking Barbara question after question, but we're going to have to put an end time on the webinar today. So if you do have any other questions, please stick them in the chat. or you can send them to me and I'll pass any on to Barbara. So yeah, I thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you to all of our presenters for being here today.